So, Mr. Zhang, please be seated, and please close the door, and let's get started. This is the second meeting of the Bills Committee on Poisons and Pharmacies Amendment Bill 2014. We have invited many deputations to tell us their views this afternoon. We hope that we can end by 4:30, and members, you're free to come and go. So please invite the administration to join us now.
因為我知大家都周圍走㗎啦咁。
I know you have to go in and out of the room because of other meetings in progress, so feel free.
好啦，咁咧就大家。
While we're waiting for the administration and deputations to come in, I'd like to tell members that we have a bundle of responses from the administration. Paper CB2 1522/1314 bracket 01. We have responses from the administration for members' information.
And
may I brief members on the update? If after the deputation have spoken, we'll have Q&A sessions. We hope to have a meeting in June, but still we don't know yet. So after today, after all deputations have spoken, if members have questions, we can ask the administration again, and if members are still not satisfied with the policies and concepts, we can still have another meeting before we go to the clause-by-clause scrutiny. We hope that we can start at least clause by clause before the end of this legislative year. Chairman, you've made a very good point. After deputations have expressed their views this afternoon, the administration should prepare a summary of responses to their views to facilitate our meeting. I hope that the administration will have time to do that. Oral submissions, written submissions, we expect the administration to prepare a paper in response. Thank you. And for possible responses from the administration, please refer to the paper I just mentioned to you. We can have a checklist, and we'll have time to discuss that later. All right, we'll start our hearing. Welcome, deputations. Before we start, I have the duty to remind you that your remarks are not covered by the electrical PNP ordinance. And in front of you, there are buttons, and you will press until you find the channel you like. And I hope deputations can have enough time to give us their points. You have 3 minutes each. And if you already sent in a written submission, please be succinct. Okay? Without further ado, I'll invite the deputations to start first. And then I invite the administration to respond. And then we have Q&A session. This is now 2:40, and I hope we can end by 4:30. If not, I urge members to give me leave to extend our meeting by 15 minutes. Okay. The first deputation to speak is Mr. Sum Tat Ming, External Affairs Director of College of Primary Healthcare Pharmacy. 3 minutes, please. Thank you, Chairman. The college has reservations towards the bill for the following reasons. First, it is proposed here that the ASB will enforce and also make up the code of practice and code of conduct for the practitioners. Now, let's not discuss whether the board has given too much power. First, is it appropriate? The board was set up 4 decades ago, and back then there was no consideration of the functions to be given to it under this bill. We have representatives from the medical sector, for instance. Now, 4 decades have elapsed. Now we have the College of Pharmacies, we have the Practicing Pharmacists Association, so on and so forth, and we query the representativeness of this board of the trade. The requirements on AP is now relaxed. They play an important role in manufacturers. They have to monitor the whole manufacturing process of products and also the quality of final products. Non-pharmacists, so long as they have 3 years of experience after they have taken a short course of a few months, then they can be an AP. This is a retrogressive step in monitoring, and there is no one to monitor the performance of APs here. They do not have any professional liability. We are very puzzled about our future, and we don't understand the definition of ASP under the bill. On the 10th of April, there was a meeting convened by the Department of Health to brief us what is the difference between the old and new definitions of ASP. And we were told categorically that there was no difference. It's just that in the bill, the definition of ASP will be more clearly set out. However, having read the bill, we believe the new definition is rather ambiguous and misleading. And members of the trade have told us the same. So there is no need for the government to be superfluous. In the bill, the original definition of ASP should be kept. Thank you. We have Alliance for Safe and Quality Use of Medicines, Mr. Joseph Zhang.
We have 2 issues with the amendment bill. First, letting a non-pharmacist person, as proposed by the government, to become an authorized person in the manufacturing process of pharmaceutical products will gravely compromise the safety of patients. We believe that an authorized person of a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility should be a registered pharmacist with the appropriate experience. We are totally against the government's idea of allowing a non-pharmacist person who merely needs some experience and to take a short course in manufacturing as a requirement to become an authorized person. A registered pharmacist is the only logical choice here because of his comprehensive training and knowledge of medicines, from how a drug is made to how a drug affects our health. Plus, a pharmacist is trained to uphold the professional standards necessary to ensure patient safety, whereas a layman doesn't have such training. Second, too much power is being given to the Pharmacy and Poisons Board under the proposed amendment. We do not agree with the part of amendment which will give the Pharmacy and Poisons Board new power to issue and subsequently revise the Code of Practice and Code of Conduct. The board needs to be reformed and restructured in such a way that it reflects the proper representation of today's stakeholders in the pharmacy profession. Only then it will have the capability and legitimacy to carry out such an important task. Thank you, Chairman.
好，唔該你。第3位團體嘅咧。
Thank you. The third deputation, Ms. Iris Zhang, the Practicing Pharmacists Association of Hong Kong. Thank you. Chairman, I represent the association. Pharmacists have come out to express our views to you because all over the world, pharmacists are recognized professionals with the trust of the community. Well, when we graduated, we put on a white gown and we swore to put patients' interests as our number one priority. Whenever there was a crisis, coming back of pharmaceutical products from shelf because of contamination, or whenever there was pandemic, or when patients were at loss as to how to use new products, we've always come out to assist our assistants. Now, for this bill, they are byproducts, and we have to come out to tell you what are these byproducts. We have 5 points to say to you. First, regarding the definition of ASP, different associations have said that the new definition is confusing to the public and to the trade. And what are the responsibilities and liabilities of manufacturers and pharmacists? In future, no one will be truly held responsible to be the gatekeeper of drug safety. So the administration should continue to discuss with the industry. And the definition of pharmaceutical products, we have a confusing definition. We used to have a very clear definition, and now the new definition is ambiguous and subjective. As a result, the trade doesn't know what products have to be registered, and consumers don't know whether such products are subject to regulation or not. And therefore, the administration should refine the definitions. Regarding the clinical trial certificate on human beings, the validity period is now extended from 2 to 5 years. That's far too long, because a lot can happen in 5 years. And the clinical trial may depart from the original purpose, and it is dangerous if the person is not required to extend the certificate. So please reconsider the appropriate length of validity. And as for AP authorized persons in the manufacturing of products, Hong Kong manufactures its own drugs, but not as massive as other places, and therefore pharmacists are the final gatekeeper. They have to sign a certificate before a product should be released, and therefore the role of pharmacists should be enhanced rather than diminished. And I think the power to PPB is far too much. It should be reformed to make it more transparent and more representative. Thank you.
And next, Mr. Tam Po Chun Patrick of College of Consultant Pharmacist, concerning the Pharmacy and Poisons Amendment Bill 138, Section 67, bracket 4, poisons. Well, we are in support of it. However, the concept and the terms should be clearer for the patients and for the people of Hong Kong. I'm sure some Southeast Asian countries are looking at us for as examples, so we can be more clear. Prescription drugs and drugs under prescription sales, and narcotics are also termed drugs, and all these are very confusing among each other, and therefore we should use prescription-only medicine as a term. And drugs under supervised sale, well, wouldn't all drugs sold in the pharmacist or the drugstore be looked upon as drugs under supervised sale? No, actually, it should be termed drugs under pharmacist supervision sale to make things clear. And also for the bracket 1, bracket A, in section 2, in English, it is as presented as. In Chinese, it is less clear, the Chinese term, because products need to be, and pharmaceuticals need to be more supervised. I came by bus and I saw a drug on the advertisement on the body of the bus, and it is a controlled drug. It cannot be just advertised and sold over the counter just like that. The content of the pharmaceuticals is important, but the presented as is not a presented as is not a term used in China, Taiwan, US, but perhaps in the EU it is. But for Australia and the EU, there are two lines. One, without medical playing, like fish oil supplement, that is one type, and the other is prescription drugs, that is another type. If we want to follow the EU, let us do that wholesale, not in the piecemeal manner. As for Section 352, Section C, it is about the authorized person. Now, this is about lowering the requirement for AP. I am completely surprised, and we're in complete objection to that. In terms of production and the quality of quality control, the level then standard is much lower than the MNCs. Well, for the QC manager and the authorized person, these should be taken up by pharmacists only, because they will not take the unnecessary risks. Ms. Chen Wen-si, council member of the Hong Kong Pharmacists Union. Hong Kong Pharmacists Union is in support of making controls more stringent. The authorized sellers of poisons should be finely defined instead of being confounded with owners of the pharmacists. Registered pharmacist as a term had appeared twice in the bill. One, as shop owner in the definition, and the second time it appears is as employee in the definitions. So as employer or owner or the employee, who is to be responsible for liabilities? The employer makes money. The employee has the liability but not the benefits. Why would that be? Why would it be fair that the employees will have to bear the brunt of liabilities? Secondly, the union believes that for pharmacists and for drug producers, they should be made more stringent, the regulations, rather than lax. There will have to be pharmacists with experience, professional, with the relevant drug-producing experience taking up the role of control, rather than somebody who's just gone through a short-term course and unqualified. And the quality controller will also have to be a registered pharmacist. Otherwise, the lives and safety and health of the people of Hong Kong will be jeopardized. And the drug manufacturing should be raised in standards rather than the opposite. There is a real conflict now as proposed, and who is to bear the responsibilities and liabilities if there should be any incidents in the future? This must not be allowed to happen. The board should also be reconstituted. There would have to be the relevant stakeholders and parties and the relevant professionals who are really qualified to set out the codes to be the members. And a further point, the government is reluctant to categorize the pharmaceuticals. Now it is left to the pharmacists themselves to categorize whether these are registered pharmaceuticals or not. This only causes inconvenience to the public and confusion to the trade. Now, the government should put the health and safety of the people of Hong Kong in the first place. Thank you very much. Next, the College of Geriatric Pharmacy, Mr. Ko Hong Yu, member. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm in full support of the deputations just now. For Hong Kong to become a registered pharmacist, you would have put in a lot of efforts. We put in a lot of efforts in studying while other people have a more relaxed life. Now, to have the registration revoked, this risk is real to the pharmacists. And also for the standards of the drug producers, it should be raised so that the pharmacists can play their rightful role, so that they can be protected in their professionalism, so that they can live up to the moral and also professional standards that is applicable to them. Now, with this new legislation, it is highly subjective. And who is the party to enforce this? Police and the customs, most probably. Now, if the definition is presented as, which means it looks like a certain substance or a pharmaceutical product, then perhaps a customs officer looks at the web last night and say, perhaps your coat is a pharmaceutical product, and there may be others which is or back in the SARS time, some people claim that boiling vinegar would actually be a good drug against SARS. So if there are these customs officers who, having learned this kind of erroneous information, look at a certain substance or a product and say this is actually pharmaceuticals, that would not be good. And also when it comes to the courts, some people say that there will be justice handed out. But on the other hand, I think that is problematic. I do not know whether the products in the pharmaceuticals or the drugstores, they will be looked upon as unregistered drugs or pharmaceuticals. The Yakult on the shelf of a store or of a shop would be looked upon as pharmaceuticals, and it will be brought to the for testing, etc., by the authorities, and that will cause inconvenience and pressure for the people of Hong Kong. We are all going for standardization around the world and higher levels of supervision, not less. And this is what the bill seems to be going after, quite an opposite to the world trend. Mr. Chen Kin-man, Hong Kong Academy of Pharmacy, Head of Professional Affairs. Yes, we believe authorized persons should be taken up by only the registered pharmacists. If the government allows only non-professionals after attending a short course to take up this role, then the standards will be endangered. This is a step backwards. It will not be able to afford protection to the patients, to the people, users of pharmaceuticals, but also it goes against the original intent of the government in coming up with this legislation. And also for the board and the PPB, for it to be able to change at random the codes of practice for the pharmacists, it is not right, but rather there should be a representation of the stakeholders, including the users and pharmacists, etc., who are in the among the stakeholders. Rather to do that, but to leave it to the PPB to set out the codes and also the regulation is not appropriate. Ms. Chan Cho-hong, Philip of the Pharmaceutical Trade Alliance. Ladies and gentlemen, 20 years ago, with the GMP system introduced in Hong Kong, the pharmaceuticals industry in Hong Kong had a three-pronged approach. First of all, there is an authorized person, and underneath him there is the manufacturing and the other responsible for quality control. There are these two personnel. And in the past 20 years, the AP had been taken up by a registered pharmacist. And this AP, apart from looking into safety of drugs, the batch, the effective or use by date, only with the signature of this registered pharmacist can the drugs be taken to the market. And in this amendment, I think really we should be strengthening the control of pharmaceuticals manufacturing as well as supervision. And I think this three-pronged approach, all three gates should be guarded by the registered pharmacists. These three pharmacists will be able to play checks and balances against each other, and by so doing lower the incidence of pharmaceuticals and medical incidents. And also, these pharmacists who are registered, they follow very stringent regulations and are highly supervised. If there are any mistakes, the penalties are very high. Their license may be revoked, suspended, or they may be barred from the profession altogether for life. And this particular amendment is completely shocking for this very important role of authorized person, which could only be occupied by registered pharmacists, is now taken away, and this is completely unacceptable. And the registered pharmacists have the gatekeeper's role in terms of the safety of the drugs transportation and the quality of manufacture of the pharmacists, of the drug, of the pharmaceuticals. So we think that this is completely unacceptable. As for the board, the constitution of the board, after all, this is an institution set up 40 years ago. There are no democratic representation, nobody from the trade, only those who are appointed by the government and the department. And most of these people are not frontliners in the trade, and therefore the trade's voice is very often neglected. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chan.
Yeah.
Next, Professor Wang Chike, Department of Pharmacology and Pharmacy, the University of Hong Kong. Thank you. We believe it is necessary to have a code of practice. It's a necessity. The question is, who should enforce the code of practice? Many speakers are against having a code of practice. In fact, it is not against the code of practice per se, but rather who is to enforce the code of practice. I hope LegCo can understand this, and please do not bog down this for no reason. Now, if you look at other professionals, such as doctors and nurses, they have the medical council and nursing council, whereas for pharmacists, we do not have a council for regulating pharmacists. Our legislation for medicine control and regulation of pharmacists is rather out of date compared with other jurisdictions. So please note this. Please don't think that the industry is safeguarding its own interests and therefore doesn't want a code of practice. No, it should not be the case. Rather, we should consider who is to enforce the code of practice. Now, if we want to modernize pharmacology in Hong Kong, we must have a pharmacy council. Let me declare interest regarding the functions of the PPP. I am a member of the board. The Pharmacy and Poisons Board has a very important function to play, and that is the regulation of drugs rather than pharmacists. And that is where the conflict lies. The profession would like to have a pharmacy council like that of doctors and nurses, and they can have their own code of practice to ensure that it is really enforceable. When we teach students, we ask them, or we remind them to have an ethical standpoint when they practice. Now, when a pharmacist is employed by a pharmacy, I think they should be held professionally liable for what their employers do. And so please do not object to the idea of a code of practice, because it will enhance the professionalism of the trade. And as for the issue of the AP authorized person, well, even though I want my students to have jobs, I don't think that the AP must be a pharmacist. Rather, his training his experience and his training on manufacturing of drugs is more important. Thank you, Professor Wong. Mr. Jiang Tak-wing from Hong Kong General Chamber of Pharmacy Limited. Thank you. In 2009, some GP clinics caused the death of a patient and affecting 100 or so patients because of the wrong dispensing of medicine. However, the proposal will only enhance the regulation of manufacturing, retail, and wholesale of medicines. However, there is no proper or enhanced control of private GP clinics. I think this is putting the cart before the cart before the horse, and this is against the principle of fair and openness. This is regrettable. Some of the proposals are matters of principle, and we want members of this council to note. First, the regulation of authorized sellers. The PPB will be empowered to issue code of conduct and code of practice to pharmacists and sellers respectively. They can enforce these codes and also convene disciplinary boards and order sanctions. We believe the current legislation has really given the board sufficient power to regulate the trade. There is also an appeal mechanism, and the whole system is fair and open. This amendment will cause PBB to enjoy too much power. There will be no checks and balance, and this is against the rule of law. On the 10th of October last year, at a public hearing, because of objections from many organizations, the administration agreed that there would be some changes to the legislation. For instance, a written invoice. Well, there would also be changes to the requirements. However, the code of practice 1.1 for AP says that the says that the key shall be kept by the pharmacist. It has been changed to the key must be kept by the pharmacist. So this is a major discrepancy from the bill. And for the written order or the invoice, even without the support of the industry, it is going to be enforced. So for proposals already vetoed by the council, they can make use of a code to implement. We're worried that the industry may be prejudiced, there may be unfairness. Well, the bill is not yet passed, but the PPB has already published a new code. And it will commence on the 1st of January next year. So isn't it jumping the red light? So for details, please refer to our written submission. Thank you. Ms. Sabrina Chen, Hong Kong Association of Pharmaceutical Industry. We are very disappointed that the administration has yet to pass the bill. The incident happened in 2009, and yet the bill has not yet been passed, and there is no timetable for implementation of the recommendations. Now, there are many new associations set up. However, during the work of the review committee, there were already representatives from many patients groups and recognized pharmacists associations, and the discussion was based on the best interest of patients. And then there is nothing new in the bill. It has modeled on practices in other jurisdictions. We have taken part in the discussion for 6 years, and people who are opposed to the bill continues to oppose the bill. And then because of new associations, there's been another round of public consultation. I think we are very behind. We are at least 3 decades behind other jurisdictions. Well, in other places, they have already removed word poison from the outer package of drugs, from the release and also the delivery of drugs. It can be fully it can be done by electronic. And then we'll still talk about a written and telephone order. Well, it takes, on average, 10 to 12 years before a drug can be released to the market, including many rounds of clinical trials. Now, we have extended that the validity period from 2 to 5 years. The intention is to enhance our competitiveness. And for APs of manufacturers, well, WHO and EU guidelines require that these persons have acquired basic information on microbiology and also pharmacology with relevant experience before they can become an AP to manage the production lines of a factory. In many places, AP of a manufacturer is already a professional status, unless what you do is entirely meaningless. Otherwise, there are bound to be people for and against it. We hope that the administration can sort out the purpose of this amendments. Well, if you wait until there is no objection before you can proceed, this is unrealistic. Thank you. Ms. Celine Zhang, an individual. Thank you. Good afternoon, members and chairman of the board. I am a registered pharmacist in Hong Kong, and in the UK I'm also an AP of a local manufacturer of medicine. I fully support the bill because it can enhance the standard of monitoring of manufacturing of drugs and also how drugs are administered in Hong Kong. We should take this opportunity to update our relevant legislation to enhance protection for the public. As an AP, well, I have worked in a local manufacturer for 20 years. During the zero GMP days now, we have a GMP status for selling drugs to many places. I am fully familiar with everything in the production process, and I've also liaised with incumbent APs. We are all responsible persons. We like our job. We are very conscientious and diligent. We have enhancing GMP standards. We believe that drug manufacturing is a prosperous trade with good potential. We're doing our level best to improve the standard of the drug manufacturing industry. I don't believe that an AP must be a registered pharmacist, because there are people who are very experienced in GMP, in drug manufacturing. They can introduce new methods into Hong Kong. They can establish a proper registration system. Of course, they must have the right qualifications. They must have gone through recognized training programs. It must be recognized. I will not talk about any course run by any training institution. With 3 years of GMP experience and with proper vetting by the right committee, we should give this group of people an opportunity. They can contribute their valuable experience in drug manufacturing and management. They can help to enhance the standard of GMP in Hong Kong, and ultimately it is everyone in Hong Kong, you, your families, and myself and my family member to gain. Regarding the code of practice, all APs have to comply with it strictly, whether they are a registered pharmacist or not. I think this is in line with what other countries are doing. Since it is feasible in other countries, why is it not feasible in Hong Kong, which is a modern city? So I urge members to support the bill for public interest. Thank you. Dr. Li Chuiping, Senior Lecturer from School of Pharmacy, the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Good afternoon. We were established in 1992. We have already got more than 500 graduates. Well, we attach a lot of significance to safety and also ethical standard of pharmacists, and pharmacists should put the interests of patients first. Recent incidents have reminded us the importance of drug safety. Amending the law can enhance our standard of drug manufacturing. The Chinese university supports the direction of the amendment. However, there are a few things for your consideration. First, allowing a PPB to make the code of practice and code of conduct. Yes, these are important. We do need them. But if we just rely on the PPB to enforce the code of practice, then it is too passive. We cannot ensure drug safety in this way. The trade needs more than a code of practice, but thorough planning. For instance, enhance the role of pharmacists in primary care, continuous professional education of pharmacists, enhancing the public's knowledge of medicine. So what we need more urgently is a pharmacy council. It's just like the medical council, the nursing council for doctors and nurses to implement and promote various initiatives to promote health in general. So this professional needs a similar setup. I hope that the bill can add a provision to set up a pharmacies council. And for repackaging of drugs, we know that many dispensaries repackage drugs in the presence of pharmacists. The purpose is to let the public or patients or their carers understand the dosage and also the way drugs should be administered. This is effective in promoting drug safety. We hope that the bill can allow this to happen. Please do not disallow chemists to do this very good thing, even without the presence of a pharmacist. And sometimes community pharmacists will have a lot of opportunity to look after patients. If pharmacists are stationed in all community pharmacies, it is very good. So please consider this point. Thank you, Dr. Li. Mr. Zhong Qinhua, Primary Healthcare Quality Alliance. Thank you. The clinical trial certificate should not be extended from 2 to 5 years because a renewal per 2 years can allow the authority to check whether clinical trials are being done properly. And as for APs, they should be registered pharmacists. We should not lower the standard in order to make room for non-professionals. Without the monitoring of pharmacists to be the final gatekeeper, we will lower the standard of drugs. And for pharmaceutical products, the original definition has already got a sense of a treatment, and so we should not add the two words presented as. This will lower the certainty of the definition, and it has made an objective definition to a subjective one, and that will create a lot of misunderstanding and confusion. And the PBB from time to time amend the code of product or code of practice in part or in whole. This is giving the PBB too much power. Its powers are excessive, and therefore we propose to add more professionals and lay members to the PPB when drafting the code of practice. Or rather, we should let representatives of the profession to be involved for the board to endorse it. Thank you.
張先生，羅生。
Mr. Law Cheng of the Drug Safety Consortium. Thank you. We are against giving the PPB the new terms of reference or power, and that is to amend the Code of Conduct and the Code of Practice from time to time. I would like to give you an example. The Code of Practice and Code of Conduct is not law, as in the school situation. The Code of Conduct and Code of Practice are not the same, and if the pharmacist contravenes a law, there will be legal penalties and sanctions. But to confound the two concepts of code and law is not right. And also for the PPB to be able to have this power is equivalent to the school being given the power to amend the law, and that is not right and unreasonable. In the long term, I would propose that the PPB be separated into 3 arms, and at different times, a different arm would come in. One for pharmaceuticals control, the other would be issue licensing for the manufacturers, and third, the licensing of pharmacists. Thank you. Next, we will have the Hong Kong Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association, Mr. Chang Yu Kwong. Thank you. Our association is basically in support of this bill, and we believe that this bill will bring Hong Kong one step forward and to update ourselves from the very old and dated legislation that we have in Hong Kong. But there are a couple of areas where we are worried and concerned about. Many have talked about that just now. One being the PPB, it having the legislative and enforcement and judiciary powers all in one. But unfortunately, the stakeholders in the trade are very few and far between in the representation. There are but 3 representatives or 3 members of the PPB from the trade, and this is highly unhealthy. We want there to be a major overhaul of the constitution of the PPB to have more stakeholders and practicing pharmacist representatives on the PPB. Only by so doing will we be able to set out an effective code of practice, the legislative procedure, and also in enforcement be able to balance the views and opinions of various stakeholder groups. And also, given the new legislation or the bill, the company or the individual having found guilty will have to bear the cost for evidence gathering. And I think this seems to be a precedent in Hong Kong legislation, we feel. And this is in contravention with the spirit of the law, because a person, where he contravenes the law, if it's a criminal offense, then he goes to jail. Otherwise, he can be fined, and he can be fined a large amount if necessary in order to recuperate the cost for bringing about the prosecution. It should not be that the person is put into jail, but at the same time be made to bear the cost of prosecution and evidence gathering. So what would happen? The person may take up a liability of millions of dollars, and after he's released from jail, what does he have to do? Repay the debt? I think this is something that we should look into. Thank you very much. Hong Kong Doctors Union, Dr. Yang Chiu-Fat. Thank you. The Hong Kong Doctors Union is in staunch support with the intent of the bill in protecting the safety and of the Hong Kong public. But it seems that the cart is put in front of the horse in this particular instance when we look at the details. And the problem lies in the authorized person. If a pharmacist, which was the original requirement for AP, for that to be lowered to a non-registered pharmacist, and given the AP position being allowed to be taken up by someone much less qualified, we believe that this is a step backwards, and it will undermine the standards of control in Hong Kong. And for the invoice or orders in black and white, we, that is, our union believes that this is inconvenient. It would delay things, delay the pharmacy or the pharmaceuticals in reaching the hands of the patients, and we believe that this is just not right. But the government is being very tricky. They're putting this into the codes rather than into the law. And this PPB is responsible for the code. And this is going through or using loopholes of the law. And we believe that the government is being very devious here. Now, it was also mentioned just now that the PPB is overly wide-ranging in its powers. And the members of the PPB are mostly government appointed. I also agree that pharmacists should have a pharmacy council as well, just like the medical doctors have the medical council. And they should set out the code rather than for the government to set out the code through the PPB. After 1997, the medical council, the representative from the UK Medical Council had already been taken out. But still, we see in PPB the UK representative, and I think this is not right on the part of the government. For such public body, while the government is reviewing the makeup of public bodies, the PPB should also be looked into in its constitution. Ms. Chiu Pik Kam of the Asia Regulatory Professional Association. I am a registered pharmacist and I represent the association. We are in support of this bill because pharmacy, it has decisive effect on the safety and health of the people. We believe production, import, export, wholesale and retail should be closely regularized. Hong Kong has a very backward system and legislation. The countries have already stepped up with their legislation in pharmacy and pharmaceuticals, but Hong Kong is still in the era 40, 50 years ago as practiced in the UK. With this new bill, there will be a raising of standards across the board. As a registered pharmacist, for there to be a new code of conduct, code of practice, it is really to provide clearer directions to the trade and profession so that the profession can abide by these codes and therefore protect the safety and health of the Hong Kong people, lower the risk of misconduct, and also raise the confidence and position and respect for the pharmacists. And these are already well honored in other jurisdictions and countries. We would want these to be introduced into Hong Kong so that Hong Kong is closer in terms of standards with the international arena. What we do not want to see is further incidents in Hong Kong surrounding pharmaceuticals. I do not want there to be more incidents before this bill and the codes be passed. Next, we will ask Ms. Chang Sao-Chu of the Society of Hospital Pharmacists of Hong Kong. Thank you. Today, apart from representing the society, I also represent the Chinese University, Hong Kong University graduates of pharmacists. For this particular Pharmacy and Poisons Amendment Bill, the intent is to protect the people of Hong Kong so that they have their hearts at ease in using the pharmaceuticals in Hong Kong. And we have seen in the past years various incidents, and we also know that in the existing legislation there are lots of loopholes. So there is a need and importance for the amendments. However, looking at the amendments, these are piecemeal, and they are in parcels and piecemeal. And in the interest of the safety of usage of drugs for the people of Hong Kong, we have the following suggestions. One, in terms of the code of practice. In the amendment bill, the PPB will have jurisdiction over the code of practice, that is, set out the code of practice and also amending the code of practice, but it is silent on the process of amendment of the code of practice. A lot of people just now have spoken to this. There is a medical council for the medical doctors, nursing council for nurses, but no pharmacy council for pharmacists. Before we set this council up, to have this power given over to the PPB is a great point of concern for us, and this is not right. Where necessary, we believe that there should be a pharmacy council set up. And the Pharmacy Council should have its own frame of reference and to set out the code of practice and the code of conduct. Where there is any contravention of the code of conduct and practice by pharmacists, then according to the practice of the Medical Council and Nursing Council, through the disciplinary committee under the council, there should be actions taken. A second point is that there is aging of the population in Hong Kong, and there are insufficient nursing as well as medical doctor professionals. But in our medical framework, in the community, and in the primary health care, there are some 500 pharmacists, and within this whole system, they are neglected. These professionals are neglected, and therefore we believe that for healthcare or primary healthcare pharmacists in the present bill, they should be given their proper position. These 500 primary healthcare pharmacists should be given the position and role that they deserve. Thirdly, for adverse reactions to pharmaceuticals and drugs, there are no systems in Hong Kong for reflecting such incidents to the government. Very often only the hospitals have records and know about them, but not the government. So while we are amending the law, we believe that there should be some legislative basis for the pharmacists and the medical doctors to mandatorily report such incidents to the government. Thank you very much. Next, we have Ms. Che Chen Pui Wah of the Pharmaceutical Society of Hong Kong. We have over 40 years of experience, and our members include pharmacists, manufacturers, and drugstores, etc. And we are in principle in support of the Pharmacy and Poisons Amendment Bill. We want this to be passed, but there are a few points of amendments that we would want to suggest. One, the PPB should not be the body to promulgate the code of conduct and practice for pharmacists, but rather they should be responsible for licensing registration of wholesale and retailers, as well as analysis of reports on unsound drugs. The enforcement of the law and also the legislative function is also resident in the Medical and Health Department. Now, if the PPB, with personnel or members appointed by the department, will lack independence, rather there should be a pharmacy council set up, much like the medical council and the nursing council, which is independent to monitor and supervise the pharmacists in their code of practice, in their professional development, and in their practice, and also to dispense with disciplinary procedures and measures against pharmacists, and also for professional development of pharmacists. We do not believe that the PPB should be the promulgation body for the codes, but rather the Pharmacy Council. And also, this really should not be part of the Pharmacy and Poisons Amendment Bill. Rather, the setup of the Pharmacy Council should be incorporated into the bill to monitor the practice of pharmacists and also deal with any disciplinary cases for pharmacists. And another point we want to bring up is that the PPB can apart from promulgating the codes of conduct and practice, be able to, from time to time, amend these codes in order to reflect the concerns of the profession. We believe that the law should very clearly state that for such decisions, there must be full and open consultation with the stakeholders and the professionals in order for there not to be abuse of powers by the PPB. Now, as for the AP definition, we are really not referring to pharmacists, but referring to a business. We believe for there to be a definition of registered pharmacist is unclear to be put into this part of the bill.
The last speaker, Mr. Lam Chi-yang, Hong Kong Alliance of Patients Organizations. Thank you. The alliance was set up 21 years ago with 43 patients groups now, including one from the SARS Mutual Help Group. The bottom line of the alliance is to ensure drug safety and patient safety, and we cannot fall beyond that. We have collected views of our members, organizations. We've also exchanged views of the industry to understand what the bill is about. At the previous meeting with the Council, I did say that we are concerned about a requirement for drugs to be ordered in writing. The administration would like to use codes of practice to regulate the practice of pharmacists. When it comes to the ordering of drugs, in writing, I don't think you have not considered the possible implications. I think the administration would like to circumvent the need for code of practice by ordering drugs in writing. Yes, drug safety is important, but when it comes to the order and delivery and use of drugs, there must be proper monitoring, and therefore there should be a proper electronic system to do it. You should not expect doctors or industry to verify their orders just by writing, because it can be in the form of fax messages, email, and SMS, according to the administration. Well, such formats can also be can be taken casually, and you cannot ensure safety. The whole system is government-led. If the PPB is responsible for making the code of practice and code of conduct, from what we've heard this afternoon, the trade has a lot of reservations. I hope that the administration can listen to the views of industry and ensure that we can ensure patient safety. Thank you. 21 organizations have spoken. We thank these deputations, and I now give the floor to the Deputy Secretary to respond Thank you. First, the intention of the bill is to ensure the safe use of drugs by patients. Well, for the background, I think I explained at a previous meeting. There was an incident leading to the setup of a review committee. Many organizations are members of the review committee. In 2009, the review committee came up with 75 recommendations, 16 of which can only be implemented by legislative amendments. Now, I will first like to reply in general to the remarks made by organizations today. We have already prepared a written reply to views. Well, we only received the views at close of play on Friday and yesterday, but we have already prepared a written response to those comments received. Now, first, some general responses. It appears that many organizations or deputations have expressed their views on a few points. I'd like to clarify them. First, the AP, authorized person. I really have to apologize. Even very late yesterday, we sent a letter to the chairman to clarify the point about AP. First, we have not removed the requirement that registered pharmacists can be APs. In other words, registered pharmacists can or will continue to be APs. In fact, most APs are registered pharmacists. However, there is an additional requirement. In future, PPB can allow persons that have got the right qualifications and experience to be APs as well. As pointed out in our letter to the chairman, this is in accordance with EU requirements, and these are people, well, that have studied inorganic chemistry, microbiology, physiology, and toxicology, so on and so forth. So it's not that any technician with 3 years of experience and with some qualifications can be APs. Now, if necessary, we can give you relevant requirements of other jurisdictions. I think many practicing pharmacists here understand the practice of other countries. Well, in 2009, the incident was caused by the molding of a certain drug. So that is something to do with microbiology, because the dispensing of medicine is not just about chemistry. There is microorganism control and also quality assurance in the process, so on and so forth. In future, to be the AP of a GMP manufacturer, all persons who satisfy the qualification requirements must possess 3 years of experience in a GMP manufacturer. So in the main, we expect that person to have knowledge and experience in GMP. So we have elevated our standard to make it on a par with other jurisdictions. In the bill, we are going to adopt the same standard as EU and also other places. Second, members are concerned as to whether PB will enjoy too much powers, and whether it has already issued a code of practice. In fact, the current PBB is not empowered to formulate any code of practice, not for pharmacists, not for ASPs, and not for licensed sellers of poisons, because the PPB is not empowered by any piece of legislation to do that. I agree that professional development of pharmacists is very important. We have many professional organizations of pharmacists. However, 4 different organizations have 4 codes of practice. If this profession is subject to 4 different codes of practice, now the board has no say over which code should prevail. So our proposal is to amend the legislation to allow the PPB to devise code of practice, not just for pharmacists, but also code of conduct for manufacturers and also sellers. For instance, how record of sales should be kept. The PPB can only do so when it has got the power. I think what we propose here is in line with what is done overseas, because codes of practice will be very meticulous. It's about how the sale of poisons, for instance, should be registered. If the board doesn't have this power, when there is an incident, there is no definitive or no authority over what should be the right practice. Now, there are 3 codes of practice, and one is as short as this. I can have it tabled for you. So what is the PPB doing now? We have just presented to the Bills Committee a chart. We have set up working groups on different areas, and all stakeholder organizations have been invited to participate in these working groups. Now, for the working group on code of practice or code of conduct for pharmacists, all relevant organizations have been invited to take part. We want the system to be fair and open so that we can uniform and standardize the different codes, so that in future there will be one single code for the whole profession to adhere to. We understand the professional development of pharmacists, and we've discussed whether the PBB should be split into different committees with different functions, but that will be discussed by another committee on manpower, resources, and coordination. There is still a long way to go, but PPB is not just responsible for the conduct of pharmacists. We also have to regulate the manufacturing of drugs. I know time is short, but I must go on to another area, and that is the clinical trial certificate. The validity period is now 2 months. When it is 1 year, 9 months into the certificate, the trial has to stop pending a renewal. This is far from desirable, so we've proposed to extend it to 5 years. A written order, well, it's all because of the incident. Nowadays, we accept order of drugs by fax, by email, and by SMS. And if you think that this is not convenient enough, you allow a telephone order, then we will invite members to consider whether patient safety should take priority over the convenience of user. Now, if a patient really needs that particular pill for life-saving, he should go to the A&E department. All right. I think we should give some time. All right, my response will be tabled. All right. I do have the duty to allow the administration to respond to views expressed by deputations. So the administration has commented on the powers of PPBs and also the qualifications of the AP and also the code of practice and the validity period of the clinical trial certificate. All right. The administration has responded to these issues. And tabled, we have a paper from the administration, CB2 1522/1314/01. And the letter is either tabled or sent to you by email. And we've also got another paper on administration's responses. All right, if members have questions, you can now ask them. Claudia Mo, Ellen Leung, Albert Chen, Fernando Zhang, Vincent Fang, and Leung Ka Liu. Because of time constraint, 3 minutes each, please. Claudia Mo. Thank you, Chairman. The administration claims that there are 3 different codes of practice. Other codes of practice will be circulated to members for your information. According to administration, that is rather too many, and they should be unified. And they're willing to talk with the industry. I think you're doing it the same way as the constitution reform. You just pretend to be open-minded. You see, you see the objection from the deputations, and you are like a teacher teaching kids. Why don't you have a pharmacy council? We have a medical council, nursing council. How come pharmacists cannot have their own council? Why should bureaucrats who are laymen lead this industry? So you have talked at length, but you have totally disregarded the views expressed by professionals this afternoon. So why don't you address the point of setting up a pharmacy council? At least 3 speakers, including lecturers at universities, are asking for this professional body instead of allowing government bureaucrats to decide what should be their code of practice and what they should do in professional practice. And when they have any incidents, you'll be responsible for disciplining them. This is outrageous. We've got professional lecturers, and also there is no report system or notification system for the adverse drug reaction. So you just read from a piece of paper. You are not addressing the concerns of the deputations. Dr. Kao was a doctor, and Professor Chen, who taught nursing, are both absent. So my question to you is, are you really going to expand the powers of the Pharmacies and Poison Board to as much as you like? No, we have not changed their powers under the current legislation. It's just that they will be authorized to devise a code of practice. And in the current PPB, we do have representatives of registered or professional pharmacists. Well, it was also mentioned that the PPB has already prepared a code of practice ready to be launched. And yet their own associations have got 3 codes. So which one has is legally binding?
Under the PPP, there are different working committees. One of the working committee is responsible for all the ASPs. That is, all ASPs can participate in that. And because the PPP does not have the terms of reference or the power to promulgate this code, we will have to wait. And in that process, all ASPs have been consulted. And also the working committee incorporates all the professional bodies, and they are discussing and drafting the code of practice. Well, why would the practitioners also confuse, why are they also confused that there will be a January promulgation or coming into effect of a code? Well, I do not know why they misunderstand, the reason for their misunderstanding. Well, let's not go into an argument about this. So there is a code in the draft, and it is not given force yet. Leung Kah-kit. I'd like to thank all the individuals and bodies for coming up to this deputation and talking to us. I want to focus on one point, given the limitation of time. The Deputy Secretary responded to the points taken up just now concerning self-regulation of pharmacists. The point she made was that there are at least 3 codes of practice now, and since you cannot handle this very well, the government will have to step in and come up with a code of practice for the profession. Now, whoever answered this question, I'd be just as happy. For there to be a single code and for the PPP to be involved or as a main body for this, do you find this acceptable? Well, self-regulation is always better than regulation from other people. If Yuen Kwok Keung today is to say that the lawyers and the barristers be taken away their self-regulation powers, then they'll be up in arms. Well, we've heard the society, Ms. Chang, the president of the time-honored society, and also from the university, we've heard the professors. I would like to know whether there is a code being discussed within the profession for self-regulation. Ms. Chang, do you want to answer that question? Yes, indeed, you are the oldest in terms of association's establishment date. In the pharmacy conferences, we've come up with a roadmap. It was in 2006 or 7, and we have met with Dr. York Chow, and we have come up with a roadmap for the setting up of a pharmacy council. And in 1996, the administration then had a proposal, and that is there are 2 different committees. I think it was under the so-called Pharmacists Act. I'm not sure about the exact title. But because at the time the Urban Council had to be abolished, and as a result of that, the act was not taken up, and nothing came of it. But I think it was a very good move in the right direction. All right. If the professional feels that self-regulation is so important, I'm in support of that. But given the limitation of time, can you provide me with a paper, perhaps not just myself, but the chairman as well, and Ms. Chang, the president of the society, for the background that you have told us, the roadmap. We're very interested in getting a copy of that as well. Well, let me follow up with that. The P&P board, is it a statutory body, a licensing body for pharmacists, or rather is the government using administrative measures to carry out the licensing? For registered pharmacists in Hong Kong, do they have to go to the PPB to obtain the licensing, or do they have to go to the administration to get the licensing? Can you respond to that, the administration? That is, in the existing system, is it through administrative measures or is there a statutory body? Well, the statutory body of PPB, the PPB law, the PPB legislation, well, the government did not say that professional regulation would be put into a council. In fact, in manpower planning, we are looking into this exactly. But pharmacists are very important. It is related to medical practice. It is related to hospital. It is related to the selling of drugs. And in the future, how do we separate all these? How do we regulate the pharmacists per se? That is important, and we'll have to be working on this. But right now, we are working on pharmaceuticals. And the code of practice and code of conduct, it does not only apply to pharmacists, but rather also to manufacturers and sellers. It is not that we do not want to set up a pharmacy council in the future. Please do not misunderstand that, but we have to go step by step. Right. If you can just stop right there. The message is very clear, clarification from the administration, and that is Hong Kong registered pharmacists are given their licenses through a statutory body, that being the PPB. And the PPB also governs the manufacture and also the selling of pharmaceuticals. But it seems that the pharmacists want a separate body, such as a pharmacy council, to look after the disciplinary and regulation of pharmacists. The meeting here is a Bills Committee on Pharmacy and Poisons Amendment Bill. It is not about the other issues that we have talked about. However, they are relevant. And I have heard from the profession concerning sanctions and disciplinary actions, etc. I was told that there is a legislation that the PPB refers to for deliberations on misconduct of pharmacists, whether it be revoking of license, etc. But the code of practice is to be administered by the PPB as well. That is their clarification. Chen Wai-yip, well, I think, Chairman, you do not have to clarify things on behalf of the administration. We have heard the administration ourselves. Now, we've heard of divergence of opinions among the deputations. However, for most of the organizations represented here and the organizations which have purportedly been invited by the administration, their opinions are directly opposite to what is in here, that is the bill, Pharmacy and Poisons Amendment Bill. Now, if you say it is but differences in details and in fine-tuning, we can go and discuss the bill by clauses. However, we are talking about directly opposing views, and the representatives here today are objecting to the bill wholesale. I would like to know whether the administration would want to retract this bill because it would take us more than 2 years if we are to resolve all these, and even that would not be possible. Please do not follow Carrie Lam's way of putting it. That is, we can talk about it, and the AOs have this as a practice. They think that they hold the banner and everybody will have to follow their tune, which is really not the case. Will you or will you not retract this, and let us not waste time anymore? For safety of drugs, for the safety of patients, I would not retract this. This is since 2009. There had been wide consultation and it's been decided for it to go ahead. Now, representatives here, how many of you are in support of this? How many of you are in support of this? Those not in favor? Well, you see for yourselves, most of the bodies are not in favor. Now, you just mentioned that had been wide consultation. I'm getting a headache here, high blood pressure. How can there be such controversies in principle, directly opposing the principles of this amendment bill? Don't even think for a moment that this can be passed. And here's another submission from Pharmacy Employees concerning the P&P board. In February of this year, there was a new code of practice issued by the P&P board. So who is telling the truth here? Let us prepare a table, or a table prepared for us, to tabulate the opinions, pros and cons, raised by the deputations and representatives here. Chang Chiu-Hong, well, having heard the bodies and deputations, well, first of all, thank you for coming up. Yes, there is really one voice here. And that is, there are different stances and interests among the manufacturers, sellers, pharmacists, and patients groups. But there is a point that is quite consistent among the different sectors, and that is the PPB has overly wide-ranging powers. And indeed, the terms of reference is very wide-ranging. Registration of pharmaceuticals, manufacture, import, export, wholesale, retail of drugs, licensing of pharmacists, code of practice of pharmacists, and disciplinary actions for pharmacists. Well, that is indeed very wide-ranging. If this is the overriding body within the profession, if they live up to their responsibilities and their expectations, that would be good. But on the other hand, I learn that the PPB operates in a very non-transparent manner, and most of the members are appointed by the government, either directly or indirectly. Are they responsible to the stakeholder groups? Apparently not. And today we have heard for ourselves. Well, we're glad that there is still the Let Show in Hong Kong, allowing people to vent their views. And the representatives coming up here can speak without fear. And we have heard that this is highly problematic, the situation for the profession here. And they are saying that the PPB does not represent them. So basically, this PPP is over wide-ranging in powers, and they're not representative. And I've heard a single voice there, a concerted voice, and that is there should be a professional council, a pharmacy council for pharmacists. But the administration is saying they will put that in the back burner, not take that up for the time being, but rather deal with what is urgent, and that is pharmaceuticals. Well, I agree that there is some urgency in that, But on the other hand, we are looking at a mechanism, the PPB, that is, being overly wide-ranging in powers and unrepresentative, not accountable. Well, retracting this bill, that is one way. But perhaps the government or the administration can prioritize certain areas which are urgent in order to make the supervision and the regulation more stringent and leave the rest to later. Thank you very much for the members' view. In raising these amendments, we prioritize safety. We understand for different sectors of the trade, they will have very strong views against more stringent regulation. But we have already done assessment and impact to the profession. We believe also that there are concerns and more efforts and hardship even for certain sectors within the profession and trade. But for there to be self-regulation, we are open to further amendments or content to come under this legislation. But even for such a small step as we are proposing now, for it to attract such opposition, we are concerned. Ms. Fang? Well, Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank the deputations for coming up, and I also want to thank Mr. Chairman. It was with your support that we are able to have this deputations meeting. And for the Deputy Secretary, I remember her coming to the meeting and telling us all that apart from one particular association, everybody, all the associations and trade representatives bodies are in support of this bill. I very seldom agree with Chen Wai-yip, but today I find myself having to do so. Well, we've dealt with the administration many times, food labeling, pharmaceuticals, etc. In the passing of the bill, it's very straightforward. However, the codes are complicated and difficult to adopt and pass. Now, the legislation is not passed as yet by the LegCo, and rather the code is also completed in its draft. And you're saying that it will come to pass in 2015, it will come into effect in 2015. Are you saying that the LegCo is a rubber stamp? If not, then how can you complete the drafting of the code while the bill is not passed? Deputy Secretary, you're saying time and again that this is for the safety of the patients, etc. Oh, that all sounds very good. But we all know why you want to pass this bill as soon as possible. It is because of the mistakes made in the drugs and the administered in the hospitals and the molding pharmaceuticals, etc. But I do not see any answer to those issues. And that's the first point. You can point it out to me if there are any. Second point, for the PPB composition, the members, there are no community or drug store or sellers of drugs, but only the professors, the administration appointed professionals. But when it comes to how do you buy cough drops, cough syrups, the pharmacists or the professionals you appoint may not know. You really need an operator of drugstores and primary health care pharmacists for them to know. Thirdly, terminology. There are some discrepancies in the code and between the code and the legislation. In the code, the key shall be kept by the pharmacist, but in the code, that was in the legislation, but in the code, you say that the key must be kept by the pharmacist. There are differences there. because of limitation of time, Mr. Chairman, let me explain. The PPB does not have the power to promulgate the code, but the letter refers to the licensing code.
我哋就以一個法
So is used as a licensing condition, so it's an administrative means. And in the board, there are members nominated by the profession, such as the associations for the profession. As regards how we can ensure that the drugs will be the proper ones, well, under the code, orders have to be made in writing, and there must be proper recording, proper records of drugs sold. Now, these are very meticulous. We cannot include it in the principal ordinance, and therefore we have to use a code of practice. Now, the code of practice doesn't just regulate pharmacists. It also regulates wholesalers, retailers, and manufacturers. The working group agreed to these codes at their meetings, and therefore the PPB introduced it as a licensing condition. So it's certainly not that we have bypassed the LegCo. But how come even before the bill is enacted, the PPB can write to these persons saying that it will come into force next January? Well, there are 10 members in the board. Are they all pharmacists? Or according to the industry, there aren't too many pharmacists. There are a lot of laymen. So they're saying laymen are regulating professionals. I think now this blue bill is not about setting up an independent body. Rather, it is for quality assurance of drugs. Yet there are deputations who ask for the setting up of a pharmacy council. Deputy Secretary, perhaps you have to ask the Secretary to come back and explain how come there can be such a letter from the PPB. Now, it's 4:15, but I have sought members' permission to extend the meeting by 15 minutes, so we will end at 4:45. Dr. Leung, I don't know how I can do it in 3 minutes. Well, don't worry. Perhaps the bill may not be passed at all. You have plenty of time. Okay, I know drug safety is important. And the administration claims that requiring drug orders to be made in writing is to prevent unauthorized sale of drugs. I fail to see how this is going to make it safer, because according to the industry, a written order may be faxed to the manufacturer, so it might be possible that an extra dot has been added due to the quality of the fax machine. So I fail to see how this is going to improve drug safety. Now, when drugs are delivered from the manufacturer to a clinic or hospital, there must be signing to confirm receipt, and the delivered goods should be checked against the invoice. If this is done, I fail to see how illegal sale of drugs can take place. For instance, if 100 cartons have been delivered, and if they only acknowledge receipt of 50, then where have the 50 cartons of drugs gone? So it is important for the invoice to be checked against delivered products, whether it should be written order, how is it going to affect drug safety? Can you please enlighten me? You have more than a minute to explain. We have said a number of times. Well, give us an example. Perhaps I will ask Ms. Ng to explain, because for many drugs, the name or the even the pronunciation can be very similar, and even with a written order, there must be proper checking upon delivery. All right, if the written order is handwritten, how can it be legible? We ask the pharmacy to answer. Well, you don't require a written order to be typed. You know the handwriting of some doctors. The handwriting may not be legible. It is important that the acknowledgement of receipt should be carefully checked. Well, as I said, the written order can be delivered by electronic means, by fax, or by a WhatsApp. You know, there are different ways nowadays. If you make an order by phone, the drug finally delivered may not be the same, because the person who makes the order may not be the one who receives the consignment. Well, we have a pharmacy. We have pharmacists here. Perhaps they can answer this question. Ms. Zhang. The responsible doctor or pharmacist must sign to acknowledge receipt. So the one who makes the order may not acknowledge receipt, because it must be the doctor or the pharmacist. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung, I thank the deputations and individuals for telling us their views this afternoon. Some of them have given us written submissions already, but for those who haven't, can they give us written submissions, because they spoke too fast and I could not jot notes fast enough. According to the administration, the amendments are technical in nature, but listening to the deputations, I don't think the amendments are really technical in nature. Many of them involve principles. And I think the deputations would rather have the existing provisions rather than the new ones, because the new ones are rather ambiguous. So the amendments are not technical in nature. And according to administration, the profession was involved in the discussion of the recommendations by the working group. Why is it that they have told us different stories? So please clarify who's telling the truth. And then in the previous meeting, we said that the consultation was done too rashly and not comprehensively. And according to the administration, it's not the case. They have discussed with the industry for a long time. But then many deputations raised their hand to indicate their objection. So I'd like to know whether you've ever expressed your views to the administration in writing or orally. If yes, how come you are miles apart? So administration, please tell us whether you are true or not. We are not talking about whether you have talked, but rather whether what you told us is true or not. Have you just told us part of the picture or all? For instance, they might have consulted a few stakeholders, but not all. Have they overgeneralized? I must have this clarified first. I'll allow time for both sides to comment. All right. Let's talk and give them a way out, okay? Regarding the code of practice for dispensaries, we have had meetings with the Department of Health, and our association has given them a lot of views. The first draft was unacceptable to us in many ways, and indeed some of our suggestions have been incorporated. But for some unreasonable and infeasible proposals, they are still there, and they have presented a final draft, and even the latest version has never been shown to us for further discussion and is already published. So they had the final word. Okay. Madam Chiu Pek Kam, I was not involved in the working meeting of the Code of Practice for drugstores, but I've taken part in the meeting for Code of Practice for retailers and importers and exporters. We agreed on the clauses in the Code of Practice one by one before the final draft was prepared. So there are A, B, C, D, 4 different associations according to the paper. No. I just want to say that there are different codes of practices for different stakeholders. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to respond to the views of the administration and also the discussion process. Now, I'm a member of the PPB, and I did take part in the meetings to discuss the codes of practice. In regular meetings of the PPB, we did not mention that the codes would be incorporated into the bill. There was no discussion that the codes of practice would be put into the amendment bill. Now the codes of practice are now in the amendment bill, and the PPB is granted that power, and this is shocking. And as the professor said, we do agree that we should have codes of practice. However, it is not for the PPB or working groups under the board to do it for us. It's okay for the board to promote the whole thing on our behalf, but we believe there will be conflict of interest if the board both publishes the codes and enforces them. Now, I think the intention is to make the codes more the more vague, the better. This is against the spirit of having a code, and therefore I have to let you know the process, how we worked out the code. Dr. Young and then Professor Wang. In 2009, I was a member of the committee. From 2009 to date, in the past 5 years, our union has been discussing with the board to oppose them. Well, we had telephone exchanges, we had sit down for tea, and we've also got written submissions. However, nobody replied to me. Well, on one occasion, somebody discussed with me, what if we sponsored you studies for Yichao? Would you agree to the codes? We said that we were not going to bow to pressure simply for our own interest. Well, we do need a good code of practice. The current code of practice is insufficient. I must declare interest. I'm a member of the PPB. It is necessary to improve the code of practice. Of course, there are bound to be people who disagree because of a possible conflict of interest. You have to understand, because of conflict of interest, there are bound to be people who disagree. Our current code of practice is insufficient, and it is reasonable for the PPB to devise a code. I believe that we should have codes of practice as soon as possible to safeguard patients' interests. Now, if you tell me that you have a roadmap to ask another body to govern the profession, it's okay. I would support the bill. But if you ask us to pass the bill first and let's think about it in the future, then I cannot support the bill. Because if there is nobody from the profession to be party in the formation of the bill, then you cannot enforce it. Now, I came back from the UK. I practiced there for a long time. In the UK, in a clinic, a hospital, or in a pharmacy, if you show me a carton of a drug and you cannot show me a written order, then I can sue you. Now, it is perfectly okay for a manufacturer, a legit manufacturer, to deliver drugs to me. It's okay. Now, if in a clinic or in a hospital, there are people buying drugs from manufacturers, and if those drugs are not registered in Hong Kong, if they tell you we don't know the source, from a safety point of view, in drug manufacturing, every step should have quality assurance. We must know the origin of the drug concerned. It can be from a manufacturer, a hospital, another pharmacy. There must be proper documentation for tracing the origin of the drug. And if you say you can make a telephone order without any mistake, I really doubt who you are. I'm an advisor to the government. I have been to patient safety agents. Very often we made mistakes if we made telephone orders, or sometimes over the phone we would give a wrong message. So if we talk about a pharmacy, at least the pharmacy knows what he has ordered. But can we guarantee that in each clinic or in each pharmacy, it is the pharmacist who is responsible? Because this is different from dispensing. When drugs are dispensed, there must be a pharmacist to check the drugs dispensed. So from a patient safety point of view, we do need, I beg your pardon? Please, no exchange between members. No. I'm on a different point. Professor Wang, do you have anything to add? No. Any other points from other deputations? I think Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's question is, who is telling us the truth? Yes, I was involved in many of the consultation forums. Well, as Ms. Cheng said, we had to vet the articles in the Code of Practice one by one, and most of the provisions were agreed to. And then there was trade consultation. There were forums for other companies and members of associations to attend a briefing by the administration. To respond to Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's question, as Ms. Jiang said, the administration wants us to pass the bill, or want us to accept just simple codes of practice. We didn't know that it would be incorporated into the bill, and that the PBB has the power to amend the codes of practice from time to time. Well, we don't really know how the codes can be amended and the mechanism to amend it, and this is a big issue. Ms. Emily Lau? Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, I had to attend another meeting just now concerning the Vietnam situation chaired by Mr. Fang Gang, and we are very concerned about the Chinese people, Hong Kong people and businessmen in Vietnam. But back to this meeting. Yes, the Pharmacist Association, I was told that in fact in any case, one of the bodies was set up because of this bill. Now, Deputy Secretary, you have heard the deputations, you have heard their voices, and Mr. Fang Gang, even he is in support of retracting and withdrawing this bill. And we are all in agreement with her that is the safety and rights of patients of overriding importance. But having heard the representatives today, what good measures can you think up in order to come for a more appropriate proposal to the legislature? Now, please understand that the bill does not include the code of practice. Now, we have only 10 minutes, and we have still a few more members to speak. Well, if the profession still has further opinions concerning the code, you can continue to work on it, on the code, in the working committee. The representatives from the profession are represented on that working committee for the code, as we have mentioned just now. However, the legislation itself needs time for its passage. And this is really a reaction to the 2009 safety incident on the composition of the PPB, its terms of reference, etc. We can do that at the next stage in the main legislation. But this letter from the PPB is shooting yourselves in the foot, isn't it? No, I think you need not persuade people to go step by step. You have heard them. If you're still thinking that you can get this through and pass it, and have the LegCo pass this legislation, I think you are being unrealistic, because it, you probably have to think about retracting this. Mr. Chairman, this is really very wide-ranging in its terms of reference. It is about production of drugs, import-export, wholesale, retail, and also pharmacists regulation as well. That's the terms of reference of the PPB. Let us not think that the direction is one of self-regulation. The doctors and the pharmacists have said, and also Mr. Leung Kit had also said that self-regulation is more desirable. However, we all know that the trend is reversing. The lawyers in the UK are not self-regulatory. Insurance, tourism, banking are all asking for more publicly reliable independent council or committee or body for regulation, rather than to maintain the so-called self-regulation. Now, the practicing pharmacists and the registered pharmacists, they all seem to be more or less the same, and the codes are very simplistic. They are but a page or half a page, and they're not in keeping with the modern times. And there is another code, the 3 codes I'm referring to. They are all very simple or simplistic and very empty in their content. Now, my question is, I do not know why it has come to this. Your way of thinking, your political skills, your procedures have all flunked. Now, representatives, I know very little about your profession. You're a lot more knowledgeable than I am in this, but I got telephone calls asking me to come and help and save the profession of pharmacists, and that's why I'm here. I would like to know about the PPB. Can we, instead of coming up with such an ambitious and wide-ranging bill, but rather provide the urgently needed safeguards and the urgently needed improvements, and then discuss the self-regulation, outside regulation, and the other things. And secondly, concerning the measures, not the legislation, but measures such as written order for drugs, the safekeeping of the key and repackaging requirements, and also the sale of drugs by licensed people. Without the legislation, we can still achieve all these purposes. Or do you need this legislation to achieve these practices? Very quickly, yes or no answer. Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the questions. The government had considered at length those issues. We have one code of practice for the ASP on sale of drugs. There are no codes on the other areas. The PPB actually does not have power over these, but because we have the licensing power over for the sellers of drugs, in a sense, we are coming from around in order to wield any power over this sector. There is no code under the written law, but rather under the medical council, there is a code for medical doctors. So you're saying that there had not been any effective regulation for the profession. How did it come to this? Real estate agents, etc., is it like that kind of a situation? How did it come to this? Well, this is a much bigger issue. Members? Dr. Kwok? Well, I've heard the academics, we need regulations in a number of areas, but those representatives who come up here represent bodies which are probably towing the line. But we know, and you know, what the drugstores are doing. Without prescriptions, they are selling prescription drugs to people. They are selling cough syrups unlawfully, etc. And this is not good for anybody concerned, not for you, not for the patients. Now, I would like to know, for the PPB, yes, indeed, there will have to be some reforms to the PPB. I support the reform. For frontline pharmacists, I think this is something the administration will have to give a promise for their representation. But on the other hand, for regulation, I think we must not let that go lightly. There is regulation for the pharmacists, regulation for the pharmacies, the drugstores. I'm talking about the owners of the drugstores, not these people here, but for those who are acting unlawfully within the existing laws, where there are such criminal acts or such illegal acts, their licenses, that is, these drugstores' licenses, should be revoked. As asked by one of my colleagues just now, why isn't that done? Why has it come to this? As for inspections to the drugstores, I'm not satisfied with those actions as well. For the community drugstores, primary healthcare drugstores, for sale of illegal sale of drugs, how many cases are there? I'd like to know. We have already extended the meeting by 15 minutes. If you all do not mind, we will extend again the meeting to 5 p.m. with your agreement. Yes, we are in total agreement with that. Yes, indeed, we think that there should be legislation, and that is why we have proposed this. As for the PPB, indeed, its composition is very complicated, and it is dated, and it has to be looked at again. Can you give us a timetable so that the profession will have something to allay their fears? Yes, for their professional regulation, yes, manpower and planning is already looking at this. But on the other hand, it's complicated enforcing the law or having the law passed, because pharmacists regulation, and the drugs very different. The drug pertains to manufacture, import, export, wholesale, retail, medical people, including doctors. So it's not just about pharmacists. There are a whole array of relationships and supply chain before it reaches the patient finally. Intervening are clinics, hospitals, medical doctors, and therefore the workflow is very complicated and different. But if you're saying that we immediately set out all the improvements, even though improvements are necessary, but if you say that we should do it right away, immediately, it's almost impossible. And that is why we're going step by step. We're coming up with this first. If there is to be division of labor in the future, who is to sell, who is to manufacture, and if the issues are to be compounded, that is the pharmacist with the pharmacies and the drugstores, then it will never end, the process. Mr. Chairman, I agree that for patients' safety, we should have timely review, and we're really talking about 2009 when the incident happened. And if we are still talking about retracting this and withdrawing this proposed legislation, it is just not acceptable. It's been dragged on for so long. Having heard the representatives at the meeting just now, I think mainly they feel there is a problem with the consultation and the communication. The administration seems to be very anxious. You've done so much, and you feel that all your work has come to nothing. But on the other hand, the trade is worried, especially for the representatives from the drugstores. Their code of practice slapped on them, they actually cannot execute. They cannot actually honor them. And that is the problem. And some of the representatives say that they didn't know that certain things are finalized and they have been enforced, but they didn't know about it. Well, who's telling the truth? My colleague asked. Let me put that question to you. What is real and what is not? What have you done in terms of your preparatory work? Mr. Chairman, I thank the member for the question. In fact, the profession had said time and again that they have raised to us certain opinions, but we have not followed them. Yes, indeed, we want to listen to you, but on the other hand, we cannot listen to everybody. We have done thorough consultation. We have a huge list here, how many meetings we've had with whichever body or association. We have records for all of them here, and we have tried our best to do thorough consultation. And the code of practice, each and every item wherein we have done our consultation. Yes, there will have to be more listening, more consultation, but I cannot promise that I can listen to all your opinions, because regulation is regulation after all. Dr. Leung, Carlo? Well, I wanted to ask a question of Professor Wong, but he's walked away. I believe Professor Wong is one of the government appointed members on the PPB. And he said walking into the clinics, etc., if it cannot be explained where the substance or the drug came from, then they'll be in trouble. Well, what would be the evidence for that box of medicine? It will be the delivery note. If I were in the drugstore, somebody asked me, hey, where did this come from, this box of medicine? I just look at the delivery note, then I would know where it came from. I would like to know the importance of the written order. You don't talk about principles, please, about patient safety, etc. All these are fine and good, but I do not understand. Please, I'm a reasonable person. Give me an example. Dr. Leung.
Well, in 2009, there was a delivery of wrong drug. Drug A was ordered, but drug B was delivered, and the one who made the order thought that it was drug A. Perhaps you can say that somebody was careless. Now, there is no way to tell who was wrong, because the person could claim that he did not order the wrong drug. All right. Even if it is a written order, well, drug A can be delivered. Drug B could be delivered, even though drug A was ordered. So there are two checkpoints. First, at the point of knowledge of receipt, the person should check whether the drug tallies with the invoice. And then in a private clinic or GP, the doctor is the gatekeeper. Now, if all steps are right, and if I got it wrong in my prescription, then I have to be responsible. Why I ask, why is it so inconvenient for myself? I don't mind, because according to them, very often they are rather familiar. Well, they know that a salesperson well, so they won't got it wrong. They will look for a certain body they know well to make the order. So I think at the point of delivery and receipt is most important. And second, patient safety is the doctor must check the medicine first before it is dispensed to the patient. Well, Dr. Lau, you are an excellent doctor. I also say that ordering drugs by written order is not a panacea. We believe that it would be better if written orders are required. There may be some inconvenience, but I think the merits outweigh the inconvenience. And as for other possible tricks, well, you please give me examples. I cannot think of any myself. Perhaps the Deputy Secretary is a layman, then why don't you ask someone who knows it well to tell us? I don't know. Let's not argue over this. Now, we have to note the time. Yes, written order is a point of concern. And let's see if our administration can give us good examples. We thank the deputations for coming to this afternoon. Their views are very clear. And let me try to sum up your views to the Deputy Secretary. Now, if you ask the deputations whether they support the passage of the bill or not, it is meaningless, because there are so many things in the bill. So I think there are a few points of principle. First, when the ordinance is amended, should it be amended in such a way that there can be an independent body to govern pharmacists. However, there is no direct bearing to this bill, because this bill is after all about drug safety. And some pharmacists may feel uncomfortable about the extensive powers to be given to PPB. They may undermine your professionalism or affect your business, and people have no confidence in this setup, and DS, please provide a response afterwards. And other comments are technical in nature, whether the name itself is clear enough, whether the clinical trial certificate should be valid for 5 years or 2 years, or is the terminology good or not, is it subjective or objective? Well, I think we can revisit these points in the future. Well, although we only have empty chairs here, I think all your comments were heard by members. As regards the way forward, should the bill be withdrawn or otherwise, I think we'll leave it to the next meeting. Thank you. And our secretariat would prepare a summary of comments. And then in the next meeting, we're going to discuss once again these are points of principle. My understanding is that the objective of the bill is to ensure drug safety. As regards how the other points of principle should be dealt with, let's leave it for the administration to decide. All right, we end the meeting 5 minutes ahead of schedule. Thank you.